There are many components to this activity based on gang stalking because so much of it is outsourced. And this outsourcing may include the utilization of active duty U.S. Army, National Guard, InfraGuard, sheriff's associations, even local cops, like select ones, may be utilized, joint targeting partners, interagency partners with law enforcement, which typically are under a formal agreement approved by police chiefs or other authorities, typically participate in these activities. Sometimes they may not participate, but they'll turn a blind eye to it and allow their resources to be used or shared. So, the National Guard frequently partners with law enforcement through joint task forces or homeland defense missions, such as disaster response or emergency management operations. These collaborations are governed by memorandums of understanding. They're known as MOUs that define roles and funding and oversight. The U.S. Army, including reserve components, may support domestic law enforcement projects, missions. This could include like stuff involving cybersecurity, cyber command partnerships, role-playing, street theater, or intelligence sharing roles with agencies like the FBI. In other words, joint targeting is occurring. InfraGuard is an FBI-led program. It facilitates information sharing between law enforcement, the military, and private sector partners on threats like cyber attacks, critical infrastructure protection, and so on. But it's being utilized at times not for investigations, but harassment and slander campaigns. Now, sheriff's associations secure federal grants and contracts, sometimes for training, equipment, and joint operations with agencies like the FBI, CIA, and so on. So, since targeting at times is based on retaliation towards whistleblowers, they will mask these activities as an investigation. And then once they get an okay from a police chief, the local police department doesn't have to ever target you, because they know that you're being targeted. And when you go to them, they're going to tell you, oh, we can't help you. Your matter's civil, so you don't go back to them. Sheriff's offices join multi-agency teams, FBI, Safe Streets Task Force, targeting people with MOUs, specifying command structures and resource sharing agreements, like mutual aid agreements. Sheriffs deputize federal agents for cross-jurisdictional operations based on emergency management, counterterrorism. That's why a lot of women and minorities, they get harassed because they try to say, oh, we're doing counterterrorism work, when the target is the entire time asking police for help because they're being harassed where they walk, where they eat, where they shop, where they socialize, even overseas by CIA contractors involved in the diversity and inclusion stuff. So when you're targeted on a local level and you have video proof and you go to police and nothing's being done, the reason why nothing is being done in all cases that I've seen is because local police chiefs give approval at times for such operations. So police chiefs typically authorize participation in joint operations via interlocal agreements, federal grants covering overtime. So there is an incentive for cops to do this. Operational protocols include use of shared databases, pursuit rules. The key legal frameworks typically include interlocal cooperation acts, which enable formal partnerships between agencies, federal grants like the NSA's government contracts funds, joint initiatives in some cases may be used. These entities they collaborate in targeting operations, but strict protocols and approvals of MOUs, typically based on chief-level sign-offs, are utilized. There is evidence that FBI and CIA contractors, as well as agent personnel, have engaged in long-distance operations to surveil or target individuals, both domestically and internationally. So, tactics used on targets include surveillance, fabricated evidence, and even assassination plots. So, while COINTELPRO officially has ended, similar tactics exist under different names. The CIA has been also known to target smart TVs, smartphones, air-gapped computers. There was a case involving this one guy. His name is Mark McConnell. He was a DOJ whistleblower who exposed corruption within the CIA and FBI. And CIA officials traveled to Key West to pressure him with non-disclosure agreements and later orchestrated his professional retaliation. They targeted his career. So the FBI monitors social media. They target activists, marginalized communities. There are even cases where they targeted people which are unarmed, they're non-combative, they don't promote violence, and they would just say, okay, you're against police brutality, you're a black extremist, and that would have those people subjected to community mobbing, and they would try to say, oh, we're doing an investigation, we're monitoring extremists, kind of like these people which were targeted under Biden, which had these stickers on their car, like in let me give you an example. It's one that conservatives like to use. It has a picture of a snake and it says, don't tread on me. They would say, okay, they're an extremist. So that way it would justify long-term harassment campaigns masked as an investigation. A while back, I was doing some research on military and intelligence-linked research on cognitive warfare, gang stalking, and other subjects. And I looked at this thing. It was called the Cognitive Warfare Ontology Matrix. It's discussed in search results. References are typically related to like military research into psychological manipulation tactics, including techniques akin to gang stalking, gaslighting, isolation, narrative control. Now, there's a guy named Jack Bebber. His last name is spelled Bebber. He was a U.S. naval officer and researcher. He's cited as analyzing cognitive warfare methods that overlap with gang stalking tactics. They would utilize methods based on effective triggering, memory manipulation. While not Army specific, this indicates military awareness of such tactics. And there is also an historical precedent when it comes as far as Stasi tactics and gang stalking tactics being utilized in our country. Documents that I have found mention that gang stalking tactics resemble historical programs like the FBI's COINTELPRO program, which was based on harassment and tactics that the East German Stasi would utilize. These programs involved surveillance, disinformation, social undermining, similar to modern-day gang stalking programs and allegations which are being made against some of these groups. While these were primarily domestic intelligence operations, military personnel and psychological operation units have been noted by some targets. If gang stalking were a real and systematically concealed phenomenon, the following agencies would be most likely involved in concealing such activities based on their operational mandates, historical precedents of covert actions, and reoccurring allegations in gang stalking narratives. The first one, I would say, would be the National Security Agency. Its role in concealment is primarily based on, I would say, signals intelligence and electronic surveillance. They can intercept communications, monitor online activity of targeted individuals, and suppress digital evidence through data manipulation or deletion. So they could utilize FISA courts and national security letters to legally conceal operations under the false guises of counterterrorism or foreign intelligence. Historical precedents concerning such projects, I would say, would be like what's called PRISM was one of their projects. So the second group I would believe to have some knowledge would be Department of Homeland Security, and its role in concealment, I would say, is possible because it coordinates with domestic security initiatives across 22 federal agencies. They could orchestrate multi-agency operations while invoking protected information exemptions to avoid Freedom of Information Act disclosures. So they have these discretionary mechanisms. These intelligence sharing hubs which state and local law enforcement officers are tied to, could mask gang stalking as suspicious activity reporting while bypassing oversight. Some of these groups, like even Citizens Corps programs, have partnerships with tribal entities, private contractors, which have been linked to local harassment. So these discretionary actions, these covert actions, are going to be based on outsourcing. The fourth agency I want to mention, which has been linked to this stuff, is the FBI. Its role in concealment, it's a lead agency for counterterrorism and domestic terrorism. They could frame TIs as mentally ill or threats and discredit their testimony via psychiatric referrals. They could try to discredit us and paint this picture that we're bad people when we're not because of their status. Now, the fifth agency that I want to mention is the CIA. Its role in concealment is based on domestic covert ops, typically via proxies. They could outsource harassment to criminal networks, foreign assets, creating deniable plausibility. So we have the Patriot Act and FISA, which allow warrantless surveillance, masking operations as national security imperatives, state secrets privilege to dismiss TI lawsuits. Sheridan versus NSA is an example. Then you have institutional collusion. You have healthcare systems, private sector partnerships. When you look at what's occurred even towards Palestinians, Palantir, which is a CIA-funded business, has utilized information sharing for targeting citizens, and it was created really to stop terrorism, but what it's being used for is for targeting Americans. And it's perhaps one of the most racist systems. You know why? Because some of their employees have talked about it. See, programmers which program AI at times have biases, and they're being paid to target certain types of people, and they're looking for targets. Well, how are they going to get targets? Well, they have to look for people which are typically Latino, which are a minority. So that way they can say this person could be a potential this or a potential that to justify an ongoing harassment campaign. And then we look at Congress. If you were to go to Congress, well, look at where they get their funding from AIPAC. Some of these guys have millions of dollars in the bank account. Do you think they're going to help you? The majority of Americans don't approve of Palestinians being starved and shot and mass murdered. Only 17% of Congress is against it. They don't say nothing. So targeting fellow TIs, when it involves the system, is typically outsourced, and those which are enforced to protect our constitutional rights and our laws typically don't support that because their actions aren't based on supporting the Constitution but covert action, targeting. So you can't trust a damn one of these motherfuckers. Trust nobody despite their political affiliations, their status, their gender, what type of uniform they wear, their affiliations to civic groups. Let me tell you something, fellow TIs. Yesterday I received my grandfather's medals, and I threw them straight in the trash can. It was all his medals that he received while he was in the Army. If he was to see what I've documented in Texas, Florida, Albuquerque, New Mexico, especially Northwest Florida, Mobile, Alabama, in schools, in communities with police support, he would not want me to have something like that. So out of respect for him, I threw them away. I'm not anti-government, I'm not anti-law enforcement, but I am against corruption. Anyways, God bless, peace.